Cameroon is experiencing a major wave of violence against LGBT people. Our observers are trying to prevent the attacks and help the victims. We went to see them for this episode of The Observers Direct. Beatings, public humiliation, messages of hate on social media, ambushes arranged on meeting apps like Grindr. In Cameroon, gay and transgender people face violence every day. In a country where homosexual sex is illegal, assaults on LGBT people have been increasing, certain incidents becoming national news and a source of rumor and misinformation that in turn fuels the hatred. In November, one of our observers in Cameroon told us about a trans woman named Bijou who had been violently attacked in the capital, Yaoundé. Two men met her and brought her to this bar, where we meet our observer Nickel Liwandi, who works with a group that helped her.
They realized that she wasn't a cisgender woman. That's when the violence started. They used everything they could get their hands on to beat her. They tried to strip her completely naked, while she tried to keep the little bit of clothing she had on.
The attack was brutal. Bijou was dragged outside by her hair. Around 20 people joined in.
They spread her legs to try to reveal her genitals so they could film her and prove that she wasn't what they considered to be a real woman. They spread her legs so they could legitimize their actions. They thought she'd tricked them by acting like a woman.
One of the attackers took Bijou to the police station, but it was Bijou, naked and injured, who was arrested. Nickel and his group managed to get her released. She's been living since then in this shelter, afraid to go out because the video has been seen everywhere. She agreed to talk to us.
Mon image bafouée et ma dignité aussi. Là, je peux plus marcher, je peux plus regarder les gens. Tout est tellement bloqué pour moi en ce moment. Je peux plus travailler comme avant, rien du tout. Est-ce que alors je vais rester éternellement enfermée? C'est ça le problème. Parce qu'il va falloir que je retrouve ma vie. J'ai reçu beaucoup de menaces vis-à-vis des personnes que je côtoyais avant. Ils m'ont beaucoup menacé. On ne peut pas imaginer ça de toi. Je nous ai vraiment déçus. Quand on te croise seulement, on va t'abattre.
Est-ce que vous avez la sensation?
Do you feel that it's become more difficult than before to be LGBT in Cameroon?
Ça devient de plus en plus grave, effrayant. Le regard que les gens se jettent sur toi, c'est un peu bizarre.
Three days after we meet Bijou, one of her attackers is sentenced to 6 months in prison and 700 euros in fines and damages. But such penalties are rare in Cameroon. A law known as Article 16 bans homosexual activity. It is often used to prosecute people who are believed to be gay, with sentences of up to 5 years in prison. In 2021, there were 735 cases reported of violence against transgender people in Cameroon. Our observer Akiki runs an NGO that helps the victims.
I'm going to change. I'll be back.
She invites us to her home.
I can't always dress the way I'm dressed now. I have to choose when and where I can. Otherwise, it can be dangerous.
One of the most visible trans women in Cameroon is an influencer named Shakiro. Her arrest last February made headlines. After being released, she and her friend were attacked by a mob. Her high profile and glamorous image don't reflect all trans people, like Kiki tells us.
I tell myself that she is fighting her own battle. But with her visibility and charisma, she could have chosen to educate people about who she is. It gives the public a distorted idea of what trans people are like. It makes people think we are freaks, sex objects, perverts. But we are people in our own right. People who have lives and aspire to so many things. People who are wonderful and who live life to the fullest. It's not a choice to be transgender. We're assigned sexuality and gender at birth, but besides that, there's the way we feel. It's so strong you can't control it.
Akiki regularly gives advice to people who are questioning their gender or sexual identity.
This person told me she's 25 years old and was born a boy, but that she feels like a girl. I told her, the advice I can give you is to avoid dressing as a woman when you know you're going to be in very hetero environments. It's better to dress as a woman when you go to LGBTQ-friendly places.
Being transgender in Cameroon means facing discrimination in every sector. For many trans people, the only possible source of revenue is prostitution. Jennifer agrees to talk to us about her work.
Je l'ai commencé à l'âge de 12 ans. J'ai perdu ma maman très tôt et mon papa. J'étais dans l'obligation de le faire pour gagner aussi ma vie. En même temps, ce travail-là, c'est aussi gros des risques. Le mec se dit que c'est une fille, une vraie femme en fait. Mais arrivé à l'hôtel, il constate que c'est un mec, mais au point où c'est mal violenté, poignardé, donc quand même perdu la vie à cause de ça.
Finding another job is impossible. She's tried.
J'ai déposé mon dossier dans un hôtel en tant que réceptionniste. Le boss, en fait, de cet hôtel m'a fait appel, je suis monté dans son bureau, il me dit, c'est quoi un homme qui ressemble à une femme, c'est quoi, tu sais, pour dire quoi, les clients dit quoi de mon hôtel, oh non, 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 il m'a balancé mon dossier au visage. Pareil même pour le bailleur, tu vas aller louer à la maison, on te refuse. On me dit non, je ne peux pas, on ne peut pas. Tu vas attirer la malchance dans mon gang.
Combien est-ce que vous pouvez...
How much do you earn on an average night?
Pas grand-chose, 10 000, 15 000, 20 000, ça dépend.
Ces sommes-là...
What can you buy with that money?
Rien, rien, rien. À part acheter les vêtements, c'est tout.
Let's take a look at the violence numbers this week. Have you recorded any cases? Anything online?
Yes, there have been a few cases online where public figures are facing abuse on the basis of sexuality or gender.
And how about real time, not online?
We recorded 7 cases of abuse, most of them cases of family rejection.
Observer Nickel has invited us to his NGO CamFades, which tracks homophobic and transphobic attacks online. It's been a busy few months.
Here we have a preacher who referred to the union between men as an abomination. Bashing LGBTQ people gets lots of likes and shares on social media. It's a way of building a following. This case is about one of the top Cameroonian women's footballers. A sex tape she made with her girlfriend was leaked. Most of the comments were negative. Hate messages, calls for forced marriage, calls for them to be raped, that kind of thing. There was also a scandal when a Cameroonian man got married to a man from Switzerland. People online went after the whole village. Some people just need a little justification to turn hatred into action. And there's a lot of misinformation. That's one of the main causes of violence. People are always going to be afraid of what they don't know.
Each case is documented and counted. There were 200 incidents recorded in 2016 and more than 3,000 in 2021. The rise in cases partially because Nickel and his fellow activists have started tracking them, but they also believe the COVID pandemic contributed to a rise in domestic violence, including attacks on LGBT victims, and they cite the security problems that affect large parts of the country.
There's the security crisis in the northwest and southwest. We have Boko Haram in the far north and Central African insurgents in the east. In these crisis zones, there's a heavy police presence. There's a lot of profiling based on appearance, especially among people who are different from the commonly accepted norms in Cameroon. Many are victims of economic violence because they're forced to accept sexual proposals to support themselves.
With little public acceptance of homosexuality, finding a partner can be difficult. Our observer Claude Assangi takes us to a neighborhood in Yaoundé that's well known among the LGBT community as a place to meet.
There's a bar down there and another bar over there in the center. When you sit down, you have your drink and you give a special someone a sign so they know they can approach you. It could be a sign with your shoulder like this, or a wink, or someone can take something like a folded piece of paper and throw it at you. We know the signs. They're signals.
But the neighborhood's reputation also makes it dangerous. Potential hookups often turn into traps, with the apparent suitor turning out to be a blackmailer, threatening to reveal the victim's homosexuality. It happens even more often on online meeting apps. Claude takes us to an online security class at his NGO.
How can we be certain about the identity of the person we're talking to? You might have friends in common. A friend on a social network can let you know who the person is. When someone sends me an invite, if I'm not sure who it is, the first thing I have to do is video call them. You'll find that lots of the people you chat with never, ever accept video calls. You see, for example, here's an exchange that started with, "Hi, how are you?" And then, "Where do you live?" "Yaoundé. I live alone." "Where?" "Simbok. That's far from me." And when we ask for the photo, we'll notice that the person will never send a photo. Okay, can anyone give me an example of an exchange that might take place with a fake profile?
During the exchange, he might start to say how much he wants to be with you because you're effeminate. He likes that. He'll say you're beautiful and that he wants to see you. And you start telling yourself, finally, I've found the ideal man who accepts me as I am. And when you go to meet him, it turns out he's a scammer.
Under Cameroonian law, making sexual advances to a person of the same sex online is punishable by up to 2 years in prison. Our observers say that repealing Cameroon's anti-homosexuality laws would be a first step to reducing the violence and hatred. The conviction of Bijou's attacker is a sign of progress, as is the government's public condemnation in November of mob violence against trans and gay people. But the fight for broader tolerance in Cameroonian society is just beginning.